You've noticed it, haven't you? That strange look people give you when you decline another social gathering. The way conversations pause when you walk into a room. The subtle yet unmistakable shift in energy when you mention you spent the weekend alone and enjoyed it. What happens when a man stops needing the crowd? What happens when he finds peace in his own company, strength in silence, and meaning in solitude? Society doesn't celebrate him. Society doesn't understand him. Society hates him. Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist who dared to explore the darkest corners of the human mind, knew this truth intimately. He understood something most people refuse to accept, that the man who truly loves being alone isn't just different. He's dangerous to the very fabric of how society operates. But dangerous how? And why does his simple preference for solitude trigger such intense reactions in others? The answer will disturb you. Picture this. It's Friday night. While others are out at parties, bars, and social gatherings, there's a man at home reading, thinking, creating, or simply enjoying the quiet. He's not scrolling social media enviously. He's not feeling left out or missing anything. He's genuinely content with his own company. And when others find out about this, it makes them deeply uncomfortable. Why? Because that man is holding up a mirror to something most people spend their entire lives running from, their own inner world. Jung believed that solitude forces a confrontation with what he called the unconscious mind. As he put it, your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. It's where your shadow lives. All those repressed desires, buried fears, and uncomfortable truths you've spent years shoving into the darkness. Most people are terrified of this place. They fill their days with noise, their nights with distractions, their minds with other people's thoughts and opinions, anything to avoid sitting alone with themselves, anything to avoid facing what lurks beneath the surface. But the man who loves solitude, he's been there. He's walked through that darkness and emerged different, calmer, more self-aware, and his very presence reminds others of the journey they're too afraid to take. You've started noticing this, didn't you? The way people's energy changes around you when you mention spending time alone, the way they quickly change the subject or make jokes about being antisocial. They're not laughing with you. They're laughing to protect themselves from the truth your lifestyle reveals. Their hostility isn't really about you. It's about what you represent, the depth they're terrified to explore in themselves. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable for society. Most human interactions operate on invisible power dynamics. Think about it. How often do people try to influence you through approval, through guilt, through the fear of being left out? If you don't come to this event, you'll miss everything. Everyone will be there except you. Don't you want to be part of the group? These aren't innocent invitations. They're control mechanisms, and they work on most people. Jung wrote extensively about what he called individuation, the psychological process of integrating different parts of the psyche to become whole within yourself. According to Jung, individuation is the central process of human development. It's when you stop deriving your sense of identity from external sources and start building it from within. The man who has achieved this is virtually uncontrollable. He doesn't need your approval to feel good about himself. He doesn't need to be included to feel valuable. He doesn't need constant social validation to know who he is. And this terrifies people who have built their entire social strategy around controlling others. What happens when someone can't be guilted into compliance? What happens when the usual social pressures simply don't work? What happens when a man is genuinely content with or without your attention? The power dynamic crumbles, and those who rely on it for their sense of control start to panic. You've felt this, haven't you? The moment you stop caring whether people invited you places, the moment you realized you could be happy without constant social stimulation, the moment you discovered that your own company was actually enough. That's when the real hatred began. Silence is terrifying, not because of what might be hiding in it, but because of what it reveals. When the noise stops, when the endless chatter, the mindless scrolling, The constant stimulation finally quiets. People are forced to hear something they've been avoiding their entire lives: themselves. The man who loves solitude has learned to embrace the silence. He's discovered what lies beneath the surface when all the distractions fall away. He's heard his own thoughts, felt his own emotions, confronted his own truths, and his comfort with quiet forces others to face their own discomfort with it. Think about the last time someone discovered you spent an entire evening alone by choice, not because you had to, but because you wanted to. Remember how they reacted. The concerned questions, the subtle judgment, the assumption that something must be wrong with you for choosing solitude over socializing. You're so quiet. What are you thinking? Say something. Why don't you ever talk? These aren't questions born from curiosity. They're demands born from discomfort. Because when someone is truly comfortable with silence, it exposes how desperate others are to avoid it. Jung understood that most people live in constant flight from self-reflection. He observed, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. They surround themselves with noise, literal and metaphorical, to avoid the confrontation that comes with stillness. But the solitary man's presence breaks that pattern. His ease with quiet creates space for thoughts and feelings others have spent years suppressing. Instead of using this as an opportunity for growth, they lash out at the messenger. You know this feeling, don't you? The way people project their anxiety onto your calm. The way they interpret your comfort with silence as judgment of their need for noise. They're not wrong to feel judged, but not by you. They're being judged by their own conscience, and you just happen to be the mirror reflecting it back. Society runs on predictable patterns. Go to school, get a job, find someone, get married, have kids, retire, die. Along the way, participate in the expected social rituals, the parties, the gatherings, the endless cycle of group activities that prove you're normal. Jung saw these patterns as collective programming, social scripts that keep people in line and society functioning smoothly. Most people follow them without question, not because they necessarily want to, but because deviation feels too risky. Then there's the man who listens to something else entirely. Jung called it the self, a higher organizing principle than the ego or social expectations. As he explained, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. It's the part of you that knows what you truly need, what genuinely fulfills you, what actually serves your growth as a human being. The man who has learned to hear this inner voice doesn't make decisions based on what others expect. He doesn't choose activities because they're popular, or relationships because they're convenient, or paths because they're safe. He follows his own compass, and this makes him unpredictable. Unpredictability threatens the social order. If someone won't play by the established rules, what else might they do? If they won't conform to group pressure, how can they be controlled? If they're genuinely happy outside the system, what does that say about the system itself? You've experienced this suspicion, haven't you? The way people react when you make choices that don't fit their expectations. The way they question your motives when you prioritize your inner guidance over their advice. That's selfish. You're being unsocial. You think you're better than everyone else. These accusations aren't about your behavior. They're about their fear of what your independence represents. Because if you can be happy without following their script, maybe their script isn't as necessary as they believed. Modern relationships often operate on hidden transactions. I give you attention. You give me validation. I provide emotional support. You make me feel needed. I participate in your drama. You participate in mine. It's an intricate web of unconscious exchanges that most people mistake for genuine connection. The man who loves solitude sees right through this. He's learned to generate his own validation, provide his own emotional stability, and create his own sense of purpose. He doesn't need the endless cycle of give and take that keeps others trapped in shallow relationships. And his independence exposes how empty these transactions really are. Think about the last time someone accused you of being cold or distant simply because you didn't need their constant attention. Think about how people react when you're genuinely okay without their emotional drama or social validation. Their anger isn't about your behavior. It's about the mirror you're holding up to their own dependency. Because if you can be fulfilled without playing their games, what does that say about the games themselves? Jung understood that true connection comes from two whole individuals choosing to share their completeness, not two halves desperately clinging together. He said, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. The solitary man embodies this principle. He brings wholeness to relationships instead of seeking them to fill a void. But this threatens people who have built their entire identity around being needed, wanted, or indispensable to others. If someone is already complete, what role do they play? You've felt this resentment, haven't you? The way people react when you mention you spent the weekend alone and genuinely enjoyed it. The way they question your choices when you decline social invitations without offering elaborate excuses. The way they seem almost offended that you can be fulfilled without their constant presence or validation. They'd rather label you as deficient than admit their own relationships might be built on mutual neediness rather than genuine connection. Here's what society doesn't want you to know. Connection isn't always a need. We're constantly told that humans are social creatures, that isolation leads to depression, that you need others to be truly happy. These statements contain enough truth to be believable, but they miss something crucial: the difference between chosen solitude and forced isolation. The man who loves being alone isn't isolated. He's selective. He's discovered something that threatens one of society's most fundamental beliefs, that you must be socially dependent to be psychologically healthy. His very existence disproves this myth, and that makes people deeply uncomfortable. Because if you can be genuinely happy without needing constant social interaction, what does that say about all the effort they're putting into maintaining relationships that drain them? What does that say about the social obligations they fulfill out of fear rather than joy? Your independence becomes proof that their dependence is a choice, and choices can be changed. This possibility is simultaneously liberating and terrifying. It's easier to believe that social dependency is unavoidable than to admit you've been choosing it out of fear. Jung argued that true psychological health comes from being able to be alone without being lonely and to be with others without losing yourself. He captured this perfectly. Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. The solitary man has mastered the first part, and his comfort with solitude actually enhances his ability to connect authentically when he chooses to. But this balanced approach threatens people who swing between desperate social seeking and lonely isolation. They can't imagine a middle ground because they've never learned to be genuinely comfortable with themselves. You know this truth intimately, don't you? The deep satisfaction of choosing your social interactions rather than defaulting to them. The peace of being able to enjoy people's company without needing it. The strength that comes from knowing you're complete with or without external connection. This knowledge makes you dangerous to a society built on the assumption that people will always choose connection over solitude, belonging over independence, and inclusion over authenticity. What happens when people encounter something they can't understand or control? They project their own fears onto it. The man who loves solitude becomes a blank canvas for society's collective anxieties about loneliness, independence, and self-sufficiency. Instead of examining their own relationship with solitude, people project their worst fears about it onto him. He must be depressed. He must be hiding something. These projections reveal more about the projector than the target. Someone who assumes solitary people are depressed is probably afraid of their own sadness. Someone who thinks independence means superiority is probably insecure about their own dependence. Someone who believes choosing solitude means hating people is probably conflicted about their own social needs. Jung spent his career studying these psychological defense mechanisms. He understood that we often hate in others what we fear to acknowledge in ourselves. As he put it, how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. The hatred directed at the solitary man isn't really about him. It's about the parts of themselves they've rejected or repressed. You've become a repository for their disowned aspects, their fear of loneliness, their secret desire for independence, their hidden resentment of social obligations, their suppressed need for authentic solitude. Instead of integrating these aspects into their own personality, they split them off and project them onto you. Then they can hate these qualities safely. By hating you instead of confronting them in themselves, this is why the reactions to your solitary nature often seem so disproportionate. You're not just dealing with their opinion of your choices. You're dealing with their relationship to their own rejected desires for independence and authenticity. Society's stability depends on shared beliefs and values. When most people agree on what's normal, acceptable, and desirable, the culture remains cohesive. But when someone successfully operates outside these agreements, it creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable tension between conflicting beliefs. The man who loves solitude creates massive cognitive dissonance. If he's happy, healthy, and fulfilled without following social norms, what does that say about those norms? If he can thrive without constant social validation, maybe social validation isn't as crucial as everyone believes. If he can find meaning in solitude, maybe the fear of being alone is learned rather than natural. These possibilities threaten the collective identity that holds society together. People have invested their entire lives in believing that social connection is mandatory for happiness. They've made countless sacrifices, endured numerous compromises, and accepted various limitations based on this assumption. Your contentment with solitude suggests they might have been wrong. And if they were wrong about this, what else might they be wrong about? What other social rules might be optional? What other necessary compromises might be choices? This line of questioning is psychologically dangerous for people whose entire identity is built on social conformity. It's easier to pathologize your solitary nature than to question their own social dependency. You represent the road not taken, the choice they didn't know they had, the possibility they sacrificed without realizing it was possible to preserve. Their hatred isn't really about your behavior. It's about their growing awareness that maybe they've been more social than they actually wanted to be. Jung's concept of the shadow applies perfectly here. The shadow consists of all the parts of ourselves we've rejected, repressed, or denied. For most people in our hypersocial culture, the shadow contains their desire for solitude, independence, and authentic self-reflection. They've been taught that these desires are selfish, unsocial, or unhealthy, so they bury them. They force themselves to be more social than feels natural. They prioritize others' needs over their own. They mistake social exhaustion for social fulfillment because they've been told that's what healthy people do. But the shadow doesn't disappear just because it's ignored. It gets projected onto others, particularly those who embody the rejected qualities. The man who loves solitude becomes the repository for everyone's disowned need for independence and authenticity. You've become their shadow made visible. Instead of integrating their own desire for solitude, they attack yours. Instead of honoring their own need for independence, they pathologize yours. Instead of admitting their own social exhaustion, they label your social selectivity as dysfunction. This projection serves a psychological function. By hating these qualities in you, they can maintain their identity as social, giving, and connected people. They don't have to confront their own resentment of social obligations or their secret longing for authentic solitude. But projection always comes with a cost. The energy they spend hating your solitary nature is energy they're not using to understand their own relationship with solitude. The hostility they direct outward is hostility they're not addressing inward. You've become a scapegoat for their unresolved relationship with their own authenticity. Living authentically requires tremendous courage. It means choosing your own path even when others disapprove. It means trusting your inner wisdom even when it contradicts collective opinion. It means being willing to be misunderstood, judged, and sometimes hated for the crime of being genuine. The man who loves solitude embodies this courage. He's chosen authenticity over approval, self-awareness over social conformity, and inner fulfillment over external validation. These choices require strength that most people can't imagine and don't want to cultivate, because authenticity demands something society actively discourages: thinking for yourself. When you truly think for yourself, you might conclude that you don't need as much social interaction as everyone says you do. You might discover that you're happier with fewer, deeper relationships than many shallow ones. You might realize that your own company is actually quite pleasant and fulfilling. These discoveries are revolutionary. They challenge fundamental assumptions about human nature, social needs, and the path to happiness. They suggest that much of what we consider normal social behavior might actually be learned dependency disguised as health. Jung believed that individuation, becoming who you truly are rather than who others expect you to be, was the highest form of human development. He warned, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. The man who loves solitude is often further along this path than his critics, which creates an uncomfortable hierarchy they'd rather deny than acknowledge. Your willingness to live authentically forces others to confront their own inauthenticity. Your courage to be genuine highlights their choice to be performative. Your commitment to self-knowledge exposes their avoidance of self-examination. This comparison isn't flattering to them, and they're not grateful for the mirror you provide. Every authentic person pays a price for their authenticity. For the man who loves solitude, that price is often social rejection, misunderstanding, and the projection of others' fears and insecurities. You become a repository for everyone's anxiety about loneliness, independence, and self-sufficiency. But here's what Jung understood that most people don't. The price of inauthenticity is even higher. Living according to others' expectations costs you your true self. Prioritizing social approval over inner truth costs you your integrity. Choosing connection over solitude when solitude is what you need costs you your well-being. The man who loves solitude has chosen to pay the external price to preserve his internal authenticity. He's willing to be misunderstood rather than misunderstand himself. He's willing to be rejected by others rather than reject his own nature. He's willing to be labeled as different rather than force himself to be the same. This choice threatens people who have made the opposite trade-off. They've sacrificed their authenticity for social acceptance, their self-knowledge for social approval, and their inner truth for external validation. Your willingness to pay the price they were afraid to pay makes them question whether their trade-off was worth it. The answer often makes them uncomfortable because deep down, many people know they've compromised too much, sacrificed too much, and lost too much of themselves in the pursuit of social belonging. Your example reminds them of what they gave up and what they might have been if they'd had the courage to choose differently. That reminder hurts, and humans tend to attack what hurts them. So where does this leave the man who loves solitude? Understanding the psychology behind others' reactions doesn't make those reactions less painful, but it does make them less personal. When you realize that people's hostility toward your solitary nature says more about their relationship with solitude than yours, you can respond with compassion rather than defensiveness. Jung taught that the goal isn't to change others' minds, but to remain true to your own path. He emphasized, your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it. The man who loves solitude doesn't need to justify his choices or convince others of their validity. He doesn't need to defend his preference for depth over breadth, quality over quantity, and authenticity over approval. He simply needs to continue walking his path with integrity. This means honoring your need for solitude without apologizing for it. It means choosing relationships that enhance rather than drain you. It means trusting your inner wisdom even when it contradicts popular opinion. It also means accepting that your way of being will always trigger certain reactions in others. Some people will be threatened by your independence. Others will project their fears onto your choices. Still others will mistake your self-sufficiency for superiority or your selectivity for rejection. These reactions are not your responsibility to manage. Your responsibility is to live authentically, treat others with respect, and maintain your integrity regardless of how others respond to your choices. Jung believed that the world needs people who are willing to live differently, think independently, and chart their own course. He said, "The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. To be your own man is a hard business." These individuals serve as reminders that alternatives exist, that the status quo isn't the only option, that authentic living is possible even when it's difficult. You are one of those people. Your willingness to choose solitude over social conformity, authenticity over approval, and depth over surface creates possibility for others who might be afraid to make similar choices. Not everyone will appreciate this gift, but some will. And for those who do, for those who recognize in your solitary contentment a reflection of their own suppressed desires for authentic living, you become not a threat, but an inspiration. The path of the solitary man isn't easy, but it's honest. And in a world that often rewards performance over authenticity, appearance over substance, and conformity over individuality, honesty becomes a radical act. Keep walking your path. The world needs more people who are brave enough to be genuine, even when, and especially when, that genuineness makes others uncomfortable. Now, here's what I want you to do next. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. We all know someone who's been made to feel wrong for preferring their own company, for needing space to think, for choosing depth over surface-level social interaction. Send them this exploration of why their choice is not only valid, but necessary. Remember, the courage to be authentic is rare. Don't let others' discomfort with your authenticity convince you to abandon it. The world needs more people who are willing to be real in a culture of performance, genuine in a world of facades, and true to themselves even when it costs them social approval. Keep being courageously, authentically you.